let's talk about how to get the most out of your practice session when you are sparring. I think that once you have done with the warm-up, so with the warm-up you will be going through the techniques you plan to execute in sparring. If you move into sparring, now you can do it in a different ways, that you might have only one training partner over there, or you might have several. If you have several, then it's a good idea to figure out how to go through all of them in that session or during that session, so you can have like different kinds of experiences. Because what sparring really is, for me at least, it's validation of the techniques you are trying to execute. So it kind of gives you feedback what to modify. And if I've been practicing alone something, even if it's like simple thing, if I'm practicing cutting from this angle, so it may be that the opponent doesn't have this angle open, I have to go maybe more flat or maybe more horizontal or vertical here. Horizontal, vertical. So I have to modify the strike angle, for example. So sparring teaches you that, for example. It also teaches you distance management because your opponent is moving, and if you're practicing alone, you can imagine how your opponent is moving, but it's not going to be exactly the same as in sparring. And then of course timing, so to hit in the correct time, which is a difficult thing by itself. You can practice that in sparring more easily than against an imaginary opponent. And then of course you might get surprised because your opponent is doing something you didn't expect, and good fighters always try to do that, so that's the fun part. You get surprised. You started to do something and then whoops, your opponent does something totally different than what was your expectation. So if you're only practicing against the same person every single time, both of you will be learning your each other's favorite techniques and methods, because it's like pattern recognition. So you make a model, prediction model in your head what your opponent is going to do next. That's how it works. So, and the model gets refined more and more and more. But then when there is somebody else, then maybe your model is not matching the new guy. And this is exactly why even new fighters can surprise experienced opponents if those experienced ones have only been fighting with limited number of opponents. So they're kind of optimized for certain counter techniques, but now they are facing something completely different. But for you, of course, the purpose is to practice the techniques and tactics you selected for this session. At least have one tactic and one technique, new technique each time. So what I mean by new technique, it doesn't have to be much more difficult, and maybe it's a new strike angle, or if you have been practicing striking a lot, maybe this time you will try to thrust to the face, and then that's your thing for this week's session. If you only have one session per week, which is quite okay. If you have one session per week, it's still quite a few per year. So you try to go and execute that thing you chose. Not every time. So you have your basic fighting going there, but occasionally you try to execute your own thing. And you shouldn't worry if it works or not. Take it as a practice. So you try to do it. It doesn't mean it has to succeed. You are iterating. The one big problem with sparring is that even if you have like a long session of 2 hours or even 3 hours, you still might get only 20 minutes, 30 minutes of fighting time. And because that's not going to be constant striking, you're going to be only hitting few hundred times in the whole session. So that's not much. So that's why you need to practice the mechanics of the technique at home alone. And when you go to sparring, then you have only so many chances to try that during that session. So make those count, and you have to have it drilled down before. So this is quite important to understand, because just by doing 20 thrusts during a sparring session, it's not going to get you very good. So what I recommend typically is like 1,000 thrusts per day if you're practicing a thrust, or maybe 2,000 every day for a year, or 2 or 3. So it's going to be a lot of things to do, and this is with stepping as well. So then you have that basic technique down, and when you go to sparring, you don't have to think about it as a technique. You're kind of waiting for the opportunity, and then it comes out. That's how it works. And that's your practice session for today. So you had one new thing. You did it a few times in the warm-up, just to remind yourself that this is my new thing, and then when you go to fight, you will have to remind yourself, okay, I need to do that at least once. So, and then that's it. And next time, you decide if you want to keep practicing that technique, because maybe it wasn't all right yet, maybe you had some new insights. So you go back home and practice alone a little bit more, and then come back next week to see how it goes now. And once you have that down, then you select a new technique. So it's totally up to you how fast you want to proceed and process forward if you are on this road of learning new stuff, which I recommend.